Oh, here comes one more. Hmm. And I think what we'll do to start at the beginning, just as a refresher, uh, do what we learned. What we learned. Hi, Jilly. How are you? We're going to get started on time, even though some others might pop on. And I thought it might be nice to start the sessions now with, now that we went through the first four of the verses of the Yoga Sutra, and we learned that actually yoga is quieting the mind, stilling the mind. And we learned that because by doing that, some truth can be revealed. And so it's a good thing to do as we start trying to absorb these teachings. Let's kind of take a moment, like a minute, to just settle and be able to drop into the present moment, let go of all the stuff going on in your busy lives, and just be here now to be able to receive the teachings. Okay, so close your eyes if that feels good, and just be present. Okay. All right. So I will start with a quote that is by Sri Swami Satchidananda, and he wrote one of the texts that I reviewed last time we were together, and it says, "Everything begins in the mind. If you want to see clearly, you need clear vision." Pretty simple. So perception is reality. And when you think of like the advertising industries, they know that whether it's true or not, if they can put it out there and make it seem realistic, we can perceive it as truth anyway. And we react accordingly. And so think of all of the things in our lives that all of the experiences, they shape they shape our belief system, and then everything we are experiencing, we it might be colored by our belief system. And so what we're trying to do is kind of clear all of those maybe misconceptions or those those colored glasses. Let's say you might have your rose colored glasses, or you might have your dark opaque glasses. So we're trying to just take those off and see things clearly. Hi, Amy. So an analogy that comes up in some of these texts is, let's say you had to go down into your basement. There was some like emergency going on and your power went out, and that's how you accessed turning on your power. You go down in your basement and it's dark, but there's light coming through somewhere, and you see like this coiled rope on the floor, but you don't know it's a rope. It's just a shape to you, and you might perceive it as a snake, and you're petrified of snakes, and you can't really do the thing you went down to the basement to do because of your fear of this snake. And so you're perceiving it, it's affecting your body. Your heart is beating faster, you're becoming agitated, your adrenaline's going, and you're immobile, you're not able to accomplish what you want to, but then you realize it's not a snake at all, it's just a rope. But even though it wasn't a snake ever in the first place, it still had that same effect on you. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to see things clearly, see things in the way they really are. Um, Fear-based thoughts repeatedly interrupt reason. And as in that example, even though we were never in danger, by falsely perceiving it as such, we're experiencing the same thoughts. Our perception is can become our reality. Um, so examine the realities of your life, the assumptions and the past experiences and the hopes and the fears that have shaped your world. And just take that moment to try to try to another analogy is if you walk up to a mirror, and this mirror you want to see yourself, see who you really are, but you go up to the mirror and it's got dust all over it, so you can't really see anything clearly. So we go and we try to clean the glass, clean the mirror so we can see more clearly. And that's what this text is all about, and it gives us tips and tricks and tools of how to do it. Our experience of life depends on how we perceive the happenings of the moment. And this text tries to answer, is there something more to life? What is the true nature of life? Is there any purpose and meaning to it? Why are we born? How and where does God fit into all of this? Does God even exist? So this text is trying to answer those questions. And the terms, I don't know if I talked about them yesterday, but there are these terms that are going to come up in the book, Purusha and Prakriti. And Purusha, there are many definitions. Pure, unbound consciousness. It could be called God. It's the thing that is there and it is truth and it isn't changing. It's always there. It could be spirit. It could be described as um, Atman or your soul. Um, and so in this yoga, these teachings, that exists. And then there's Prakriti, and Prakriti is everything of this world, and everything is changing. So the teaching is we get very attached to this world, we're living in it. And of course, love is such an important component of this world, and you try to create this life that you love, and you've got your loved ones, and here we are. We're so fortunate. Most of us live in a place that is so wonderful and beautiful, and we get attached to things as they are, but this whole life is impermanence. And so it's trying to help us navigate the fact that what we're going to experience in this life, it's prakriti, it's impermanence. Um, you're going to have experiences that are wonderful and beautiful, and then you're going to have loss too. And then a term comes up, avidya, and that is spiritual ignorance, where we we just we may know that intellectually, but as we go about our days, we're not embodying that belief system. Avidya, ignorance, obstructs the experience of our true identity, is the fundamental confusion of this Purusha with Prakriti. It kind of gets them mixed up. And we regard the impermanent as permanent. Anything we're going to experience here has impermanence. We confuse the non-self with the self. So like the ego self as the most important thing. And like the drama of our own life is really, we're the center of the universe, right? Um, the teaching of yoga points the way to its removal, the removal of this ignorance. In Sri Patanjali's day, it was common for teachings to be transmitted orally. And so I talked about a little bit about this and who he was. And I came up with this in this text and want to share this with you. We do not know when or by whom these teachings were formed. Patanjali didn't come up with the teachings. He just wrote them down into this text, but they existed long before that. And there are 4 chapters. We'll go through them all, and they each emphasize a different aspect. And it's a science. It's a science more than it is a philosophy, but it's often referred to as a philosophy. And this yoga is called Raja Yoga, which means royal yoga. So if you are out there in the world and you heard of Raja Yoga, it's this. It's not the physical practice of yoga. They're referring to this. Um, any questions about what we covered last week or what I sent you or what I'm talking about right now before we move on?
I don't have a question, but this is Lyanne. I have a comment. The talk, I missed the very first few minutes here, but the talk was really wonderful. I
Okay.
really that talk that really I wrote down stuff from it that I just was really, like the kinds of happiness and the the self being either the self or the truth. I don't remember what he said was beyond proof, but proof is the main activity of the mind. All kinds of things were really
Yeah.
cool in that. I'm going to listen to it again.
Good. Thank you for
Yeah.
saying that. I appreciate that. Yeah. And the intent again of this text is to help us out of that ignorance and with these tools, and it's practical stuff. Anybody else? Anything? Go ahead, just chime in. Just unmute yourself and chime in if you have anything. Okay, and you can interrupt me too while we go along. So we talked about 1.1, now the discipline of yoga, and in that clip that I sent, there was a big discussion about discipline. Um, the ability to focus our attention is an important requisite in all areas of learning, but especially in spiritual matters, subtle philosophical observations. Um, and then 1.2, the restraint of the modifications of the mind stuff or the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. So I often say quiet the mind, but you it's not emptying your head of any thoughts, but if we could just start to focus on one thing. Um, and when we do that, we are, the word yoga means comes from yud, which is the act of uniting something. And and then we get to this thing of like the ego. The ego, we talked a little bit about it, but the ego is like a dog, and this is what comes from this text, and I'll use this analogy. It's like a dog marking its territory in a forest. Before the dog came along, the trees were already there. But when the dog adds its scent to the trees, it feels like they're his trees. So the ego stakes out its borders and it's trying to um, assert its self identity and then exert effort to maintain it and strengthen it. But as we do this thing, unite, and what are we trying to unite with? Perhaps it's all living things, perhaps it's absolute truth, perhaps it's this source. We have to kind of unplug from the ego self. And and it'll come up later. Really, what a lot of that looks like is non-attachment, non-attachment to this thing, the things that are in this world, which are again in their prakriti, their impermanence. So the yogi's first task is to eliminate not just the ego, but that what pollutes it. And when that is accomplished, negative traits disappear that come with the ignorance and the attachments. A lot of our selfishness comes from attachments. And then it leaves virtue there. Virtue is intact. Um, but even a clean ego has limitations, our senses of separateness. Enlightenment requires One more stage. The transcendence of the ego is shifting from identifying oneself as body mind to the realization of oneself is Purusha. Oneself, Purusha, again, being that thing that isn't changing. Like we have, you may have heard that concept of a person's body will give out and die, but the soul continues on. And so vritis, which comes up in this second line, vritis literally means whirling. So when we think about our thoughts, I find they're often moving from one thing to the next. Vriti, whirling, the word kind of sounds like you're taking something and you're whirling it around. Vriti. It's so it can be dizzying, a dizzying movement. It's it's not just a thought, it's the activity of the mind going from one thought to another thought to another thought to another thought. Vriti activity is the mind's attempt at trying to, why does our mind do this? It's trying to make sense of things. It's trying to, every time we have a new experience, we're trying to like categorize it and make sense of it and um, relate to it as something else that we've experienced so we can understand it. Um, it takes us away from the objective truth of pure experience and involves us in the drama of the mind. So if you imagine a newborn baby just tasting food for the first time and what that experience would be like versus somebody puts a plate in front of us and we look at the plate and we're trying to identify, we can almost already taste it before we've actually put it into our mouth because we've had all these past experiences. And it says the effects are much like being under the influence of alcohol. You are deprived of the ability to discriminate, to put ideas and experiences in proper proportion. You lose mental clarity and judgment and suffer impaired reaction time. That's with the vritis. Our identification with vriti activity has limitations and it limits us from experiencing the unity and harmony that is our true self. That is why spiritual life as stilling the persistent movement in the mind and the cessation of the habitual identification of the vritis. The version of reality that we create through vritti activity is based on worlds of largely nonsensical, non-sequential activities in which our attention constantly shifts among many different thoughts, beliefs, both true and untrue, and memories. And just think of all the different people in the world and all of the different experiences they've had. And so people's perceptions of things aren't always the same. People's reality then aren't always the same. The mind's incessant whirling weaves webs of conception, conception from perceptions and memories. It is possible for us to freely function among the many vriti webs, sticky with ignorance and not get caught up. Yes, and this book is going to teach us how to do that. And we need to sit quietly to do that. And then it goes and talks about, well, what happens when we're not doing that? What happens when we have not successfully been able to have this restraint or the cessation of that vritti activity? And it says at those times, we're in that whirling, twirling activity, and that is pretty much most of the time for all of us. But we're working on it. We're here, we're talking about it. That's step one. And that's when we are identifying with when the vritti is active and we're identifying with all of those past experiences and our colored glasses, we're clinging to our individuality and the ego self. And then it describes the five different vritti, the mental modifications, which we'll call that vritti activity. And he says some are painful and some are painless. He doesn't say some are pleasurable. He just says some will cause pain and some won't. Without self-motivation expectations, there is nothing to disturb the mind. Where there is no, uh, so I thought this was kind of an interesting quote. So expectations is a lot of what we cling to. And so here's a quote that identifies kind of some truth in there. Where there is no appointment made, there can be no disappointment. The source of our pain is in our own appointment or expectation. The mind, when no longer prodded by self centered thought processes, gradually settles down, becoming clear and still. Operating the mind in a selfless mode does not directly bring pleasure. It simply leaves the mind alone so that inner joy can shine forth. So, again, a concept that will come up is the joy and the bliss is within. It's not something that we should be constantly seeking from the outside, because even if we find it on the outside, everything's going to constantly change. So it talks about, again, the different kind of vrittis. I will go through that kind of quickly. One is right knowledge, one is misperceptions, one is conceptualization, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. One is sleep, and one is memory. So that's what the vritti activities look like, the different ones. The source of right knowledge are direct perception, interference, or authoritative testimony. Our understanding of life is built on a foundation of knowledge we've gained over a lifetime. So we go and we learn stuff, and sometimes it's accurate. Um, it can rely on previously gained knowledge. A classic example is, well, and then you could have inference where you know something's happening because let's say you look out the window and you see black smoke over there on a hill, and maybe you don't see fire, but you can infer that. um, he's just going into examples here. These aren't really the teachings, but I highlighted some stuff, so I will just talk about it. So some of it's accurate recollection. There could be memories that are accurate, but also memories can be distorted. Um, there's stuff that you can gain from experts and advice and guidance. And sometimes you think you have accurate information and it could be distorted. So there's real, real truth and information that is passed down. And then there's stuff that can be inaccurate, and misperception exists. That's another one. There is knowledge that's based on just information and not experiences. That's one of them. And there is memory and recollection of experiences. And there's sleep and stuff that can be gleaned from dreams. Um, and it says it in here somewhere. I'll see if I get to it, where it talks about dreams are where you're really, it's like a memory. You're trying to work something out from a past memory, but you're doing it in a dream state. About the memory, I'll read something about that. All experiences that you've ever had impact the mind as vrittis. After a time, the vrittis become subtler and sink to the bottom of the mental lake, where they become samskaras. So you may not even be active memories. You might not actually be able to pull up that memory, but then something could be stirred up and that memory can start to rise up again, rise to the top. Samskaras, has anybody heard that term? Just raise your hand if you've heard that term. Samskaras are, um, they're like, I think of them as things we keep tripping over in this lifetime over and over again. They keep showing up, these things. Um, and they're lessons like you keep having to learn over and over. Samskaras can lie dormant and not affect us. They can become active then again later on a subconscious level and influence our conscious mental states. They can get stimulated and return to the surface of the mental lake as a memory. So a samskara might be like, I might have some issue from my childhood that I thought I worked through. But then I go along in life and maybe I pick a partner who's got a similar trait as my sister or something like that. And you just kind of have to relearn it again. Or if you have this thing where, maybe you have trouble trusting people and then it just kind of keeps coming up over and over again. And you think you've learned this lesson, but you kind of keep having to go over and over again. It's there, samskaras. Now, there are ways to get rid of them. And again, in this books, in this text, we are working on that. Oh, here's what it says about dreams. Dreams are memories that assert themselves in sleep. These memories may present themselves in a symbolic form, and so are often not recognized as such. And then 1.12 is one of the important sutras, and it says these mental modifications, these vrittis, they can be restrained by doing two things. You need two things within equal measure. One is practice. We're going to have to do some things. We're going to have to practice some things. And at the same time, non attachment. So, abhyasa and varagyam, practice and non attachment. Both practice and non attachment are necessary for success in yoga. They are complementary approaches that help the mind become clearer, calmer, and stronger. The combination of practice and non attachment leads to becoming an individual who develops his or her capacities to the fullest and who is guided by a clear, selfless mind. So if you practice things and you are constantly expecting, results right away, you're missing the other half of it. It's like if you go out and have effort, you just put in effort without ease. It's a constant effort. You might find yourself spinning round and round and actually not get anywhere. So you kind of need this non-attachment to the results and a bit of letting go and surrender too. Because and I think that's kind of true for anything, as you go about life and you have, you're practicing, you have a goal, but then other things happen and you get, your your path isn't straight anymore. You have to be able to kind of go with the flow. Um, so then it talks about what this practice might look like. Um, and there's the physical practice of yoga, that's asana, that's going into a yoga class, doing some poses, and there's pranayama, that's the breath work. There's meditation, and then there's devotion to God or self surrender. Self surrender, just a surrendering, a letting go, not trying to grip and control everything. There's understanding and accepting suffering as a help for purification. Understanding and accepting suffering. So when your life doesn't go as smoothly as you had hoped and you run into some rough patches, accepting that pain, that difficult situation, as help for your path to spirituality, is help for purification. Um, Discriminative discernment. So again, that's trying to see things as they actually are. And then study, svadhyaya, they call it study. So that's what we're doing right now. Every act should reflect a clear and steady focus of mind. So those things that I just listed, those are practices. We need to live fully in the moment and develop attentive focus on whatever task is at hand. In regards to this thing that we're talking about, which is practice, which takes effort, nothing was ever achieved without some effort. So there is that. And then 1.14 says practice becomes firmly grounded when there are three things. It's well attended for a long period of time. You can't just go, I'm going to do this for 2 weeks and see how it goes. Anything you're practicing, anything you're trying to achieve, you got to do it for a while. You can't just do it briefly and expect the results. And you have to do it consistently. Don't take a long break. And let's say, let's just use the asana practice, the physical practice of yoga as an example for what they're talking about here. So let's say you want to become more flexible. So you go to a yoga class. It's not going to happen within your first three classes. You're going to have to keep going for a long period of time. And you can't just go twice a month. You have to go frequently. And bring a sense of enthusiasm to it too. So be mindful while you're doing it. And so, how you're approaching it in your mind is going to matter too. So, three things really with anything you're trying to accomplish, with anything you want to achieve, these three things: put in the time and the frequency and a sense of kind of a sense of devotion. When practice is irregular, the hoped for benefits are not realized. And so to this persistence, it does require a level of patience. And maybe that's that the other wing, the two wings is non-attachment. You just got to be patient. And without a break, it's like brushing your teeth. And eventually when you do this long enough, it's harder to not do it than it is to do it. Then the practice becomes entrenched in your life, and not doing it becomes more difficult. Eventually, you'll notice when that happens. And then that last one, having a sense of enthusiasm, that takes some faith and love and a surrender. So again, that's a little bit like that, the non-attachment, the surrender. Um, Yoga is a science. If you practice diligently, you'll get the results. We develop into better people where devotion lies, where consistency is a natural state. We could replace the long time without break and all earnestness with devotion, consistency, and love. These qualities will serve us well in any endeavor. And then non-attachment, going to the other side, is a manifestation of self-mastery in one who is free from cravings. You're you're no longer craving the benefit of the result. You're not doing it for immediate results. Selfish desires are the typical motivating forces of the mind, pulling it towards hope for pleasure or away from the dread of pain. However, for those interested in self realization with the capital S, selfish desires are not the appropriate mode of functioning. Non attachment emerges when the mind voluntarily changes its underlying motivation from selfish to selfless. Any questions at this point? Comments? And success in non attachment requires a deep understanding of the nature of attachments and of why we are being asked to avoid them. Attachments are attractions we feel towards objects or people that we believe have brought us pleasure. And then there's aversions, and those are just the opposite of attractions. They're very similar. So with aversions, we feel repulsed for certain objects or events, and we believe those are going to bring us discomfort. And then those again can become our samskaras. Rarely, if ever, are we perfectly satisfied. So when we find something we like, we often want more. And that'll come up later in this text too, a sense of just being satisfied. I'm satisfied. And enoughness. That's one of the that's one of the practices that you'll see that come up in the eight limbs of yoga. This lack of real satisfaction is inherent in the mistaken notion that something outside of us can make us happy. The more we rely on the outside world for happiness, the more we experience dissatisfaction and craving. We forget that an undisturbed state of mind reflects the essence of our being, the self, and that is where true happiness relies. One might wonder, does the practice of non attachment require staying away from things we love? I don't think so. Non attachment is not a negation of the world, but the cultivation of the appropriate relationship to the transitory pleasures and pains of this world. It isn't sense objects that cause grief, but our inappropriate relationship to them. And so in one of the texts that when Swami Satchidananda has that blue text, if any of you have it, there's the story about the ice cream. So Swami Satchidananda came here to the United States and he studied at whatever farm Ram Dass had, his family farm. And he was there and he was um, talking about these teachings. And one of them raised the hand and said, well, what about if we, is it bad to go to ice cream at Marigold's, which was like some 20 minutes away outside the town? And is that a bad thing, after a long day of whatever they were doing, whether it was working on the farm in community or doing these spiritual practices, want to go to ice cream? No, it's not bad to want to go, is what he said. But notice your reaction to things. Let's say you drive all the way there and you're super excited and you get there and it's closed for whatever reason. Are you still happy, or are you has that changed your whole persona? And the excitement is now gone and now you're completely disappointed and you're unhappy and dissatisfied. So it's not bad to like things. It's obviously not bad to be attached to your children, but as any parent knows, you may have had these ideas for the children that you raised and these wonderful dreams and hopes, but they're not always realized in the same way. And your child, well, most parents are planning to do is let them launch, and their lives can turn out very different than what you may have hoped for them. And that's part of the teachings. And it does say somewhere in this book too, and I love it when I read it, that to be a real yogi, you really don't have to, in India there are these people who have renunciated. They have they're not really participating in what we would call householder life. So they have gone off, they've taken a vow of poverty, they've, gone off and to a cave to pray for long periods of time, or um, they don't have, even Gandhi in that movie, he stopped wearing regular clothes and he made his own clothes. He didn't sit in chairs, and many just, and even in the Catholic religion, celibacy is a thing. But it seems to me that all of them, these practices are so rich. The teachings, you'll have everyday teachings just with your life, with your family, in your house, anything. It's everywhere. You can't really escape these teachings, and you can't escape the opportunity to practice this stuff, no matter what kind of lifestyle you've chosen, which I think is really cool. Um, and so when it comes to this non-attachment, you can ask yourself, do I need a certain paycheck, certain size paycheck to be happy? Is it necessary for me to have children to feel complete? What about if I develop some chronic illness? Can I still be happy, right? Well, these are all experiences that exist around us. If we haven't already existed or experienced them, we may, or people around us probably have. Um, and so again, all the things that we hold dear, there's a sense of impermanence to them. Um, and happiness can still be within. Was there a question, Linda? I saw a hand. Did you have a question, Linda? No. Okay. So I love this line too. It says non-attachment brings fearlessness. Fear is, and that's a lot of what fear is that we are trying to hold on to something and we don't want it to change. And even if it's just an expectation, non-attachment can express itself as service. And the example is the cherry tree that lets go of its fruit after years of growing, and it also provides shade and oxygen. And when it becomes too aged to produce fruit, it offers its body to become firewood as warmth, or it just decomposes right in the soil as a nourishment for the other living things nearby. The same principle holds true for those who harbor no selfish desires. Their actions naturally bring benefit to all. They experience joy in every act and not as a result from gaining. Again, Swami Satchidananda says, once you are unattached to your personal life, you can serve others. And by doing that, you will find more and more joy. By non attachment, you become the happiest. The more you serve, the more happiness you enjoy. Dedication, devotion, and love are the expressions of non attachment. Non attachment frees us to love purely. I can care and love only to the extent that I am non attached. If I am 100% concerned with what's in it for me, how much love is there? How much true, real love is there? Non attachment includes taking care of ourselves. So, resting and recreation and rejuvenation can all be part of this service to others. Sometimes we're so busy wanting for others and doing for others and trying to keep the wheels going in our own lives that we forget to stop and take care of ourselves, which is actually an act of non-attachment. Can be. Non-attachment brings skill, and there is in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a famous line, it's yoga is skill in action. And so I guess there's a notion here that to be really, really, really good at something, again, you need to do the practice and put in all the effort, but not be attached to the results of your effort so that you can do it over a long period of time. Like, let's say your child goes out to play baseball and they're having a great time when they're little, but then they start to realize it's a competitive sport. And then they only want to do it if they're good at it and they are very attached to the results. So the idea is if it's just bringing them joy and they're just playing a game, that will become a skill. And this non attachment cultivates Nirodha, which is the cessation of the 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 vrittis. It's the stopping of the vrittis. Attachments comprise the majority of our distractions. The vrittis are really um, full of all of these distortions in our mind, which come from our attachments to prakriti, which is this world that is constantly changing and evolving. Without attachment, we could make the mind focused. Meditation as a concentrated practice of non attachment. Success in meditation requires not only the ability to direct and keep the awareness on the object of attention, but the skill of letting go of distracting thoughts as well. You can let go of your to do list when you're meditating. You can let go of all the planning and also let go of the rehashing of stuff that already happened in the past because that's not going to serve you. And so when we meditate, again, that's the vrittis. So letting go of the vrittis will help and to be not so attached to whatever the future is or rewriting the past. Non attachment opens the door to wisdom. If our attention is captivated by the disappointment we feel for a tree that has fallen, life in the forest can seem cruel and senseless. But if we expand our vision, we will see that the same fallen tree is returning needed nutrients for the forest floor, as well as continuing to provide home to countless creatures. Non attachment frees the mind to rise above the self centered notions of the way of life so that we can glimpse the divine plan. And then it talks about 1.16 talks about, well, I'll read how Reverend Jagannath Carrera translated it into English. When there is non thirst for even the gunas, due to the realization of the Purusha, that is supreme non attachment. So we talk, and we're going to have to talk about the gunas. The gunas are the constituents of nature, they're the qualities that exist in nature, and nature being this world that we're living in and how we're experiencing it. So, these everything you see, everything we're experiencing, even our mind, has comes in these three qualities, and I'll say what they are. Um, the first is tamas, and it's inertia. It's not moving. It's an energy of something that's not moving. I mean, think of a rock. It's there. It seems like it's been there forever. And then there's restlessness activity, and that's raja. So think of a rushing river. There's a rock next to a rushing river, right? And then sattva is illumination, and it's clarity. So I gave the example last week and I'll give it again. Let's switch analogies now. So you're looking in you're looking in a lake and it's glassy. And if you just walk up to it, so depending on what the light is, you might see your reflection clearly, or if it's really bright, you can see the bottom of the lake. So that is sattva, that's this clarity. Alternatively, there's other qualities, and it's the rajasic quality would be it's very turbulent. You know, whatever happened on Lake Tahoe, it's very turbulent. There's waves. You can't see anything if you look into it. It's a mess. You can't see yourself, you can't see the bottom. Or there could be some other kind of quality within a lake where there's just tons of sediment. It might be still, but there's tons of sediment. And so, and I think the clip that I sent, he was bringing up the gunas. He brought up the gunas, and he was talking about. I think he was talking about happiness. And sattva is where, again, we'll apply it to the practice. You might do something that's difficult and it seems like it's not bringing you happiness, but ultimately it will bring you happiness. And that's sattvic. That's like maybe you don't like to work out, but working out actually is going to make you feel good for the rest of the day, and it actually is going to make you be healthier. And so in the end, makes you feel good. And then there he was saying Rajasic is where you think you're doing something that's bringing you pleasure, but it's actually not bringing you pleasure. I don't know. Maybe that's drinking too much wine every night. um, and then tamasic is like, I guess I would think of somebody who's depressed and can't leave the house. And they're not really happy while they're sitting there on the couch and they can't leave the house. But the idea of leaving the house actually sounds worse. So they don't do that either. And so all of it is bringing them unhappiness. You can use these terms of gunas in 1,000 different ways, but just so you know, these kinds of energies exist all the time. When I first learned about them, I thought it was very interesting to just observe the yoga students who would come into the classroom. And there were the people when I taught at a hot yoga studio, and there were the people who were there for a workout. They were there to get their butts kicked. They wanted to move and work out the whole time, and they literally couldn't relax. They could not close their eyes at Shavasana. As soon as we got to the part where they're stretching, they were out of there. Um, so a kind of a very Rajasic person and approaches life like that. I have friends who are like that. They just kind of can't sit still. And then there are other people who they really didn't, they just wanted to kind of be in a nice space and lie on the mat. And they really were looking for something else. And it was more of just the constant relaxation, even though maybe what they would have been best for their health is to do some strengthening type thing. Yeah, and so I guess, and then there are other people who are kind of more in touch with um, with a balanced, knowing, understanding the concept of yoga and understanding that every day might be different and what you need on one day might be different than what you need on another day. And then you get into Ayurveda, and there's this whole concept of sometimes we get off balance and we're too much of one thing and we're just off balance. We're too much in one direction. And yet then we start craving that thing that we're already too much of, whether it's the yoga practice and you can't sit still and you want to practice where you aren't asked to sit still. Or people who are already flexible who just want to stretch versus actually maybe it would be beneficial to your body to do some strengthening too. So sattvic is a balanced state. The other thing about sattva is I think of illumination. So I gave this example of the rock, which is inert, and the rushing river. And then think of the sun. It's just illuminating. Um, yeah, and that'll come up some more questions, comments. It's good to see you guys. Linda, yes, no?
I have a question. Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
Linda. Do you I'm in the Carrera book, and there's a lot of there's things that say experience it, the little bits that say, how to maybe put some of these things into practice. I'm just wondering, do you do those? Do you find
Um,
any of those?
I if you're talking, what page are you on?
I'm on page 50 right now where it says experience it.
Okay, because I was on 48 and
Oh, there. Yeah, or that one, or that experience.
but
Any of
but
them. Yeah.
but I guess it would depend on one. I mean,
Hmm.
one, but if you have this book and those seem meaningful to you, then yes, I would do it. I try to have a regular practice. I guess I can say that. I try
Hmm.
to have some regular practices that that include
Some of these.
I hope for balance, but I do like, my morning ritual is it's got a little bit of Ayurveda in it and there's some being quiet and whether it's meditating or breath work or even chanting sometimes. So, yes, am I as consistent as I want to be? No. And then the physical practice of yoga, I'm regular at that. Um, Prayer, I'm regular with that. Um, yeah, so I do like that that is in the book, but I wasn't, and I remember today, this morning when I was reviewing this, I was like, I just don't feel like in this course giving you guys that kind of homework. I think it's enough to ask you to just do the readings and show up here. But it's there for you if you like. Um, Yeah, so I do think the one on 50 is worth going through. It says strengthening non-attachment. Boy, I think we could all do that. So it says pratyahara. Oh, I'm so glad we're talking about this. Let's see, we don't have much more time. We're going to probably just finish here, which is a good place to finish. We're on the 16th of the first verses, and the thing about that is there's something known as the sweet 16 of the sutras, and it's the first 16. So pratyahara is another term. that will come up later with the eight limbs of yoga, and it is sense withdrawal. Sense withdrawal is a practice. So, yes, I would say I'm aware and I do it. And again, you go into a yoga studio and you see people come in and they're like, the studio's too hot. The studio's too, the music's too loud. And so these are people getting distracted by their senses. And so, yes, this is one of the practices of yoga to not get, because, okay, we experience the whole world through our senses, right? Smells and tastes and feeling things and seeing things and hearing things. That's how we experience this prakriti, this nature, this thing that's always changing. And we're constantly drawn to the things we like, tastes we like, smells we like, and then there's the ones we're adverse to. But so this is how you practice non-attachment is to um, release your attachment to the senses and trying to let go of that. Interestingly, I think in order to get into the present moment, sometimes what I have to do is sit quietly, close my eyes, and maybe I'm shutting down that external, but and I start to be aware, what can I hear? That's a whole meditation in itself. Start to draw attention to your breath or how does my body feel in this moment? All of that helps you drop into the present moment, and that's good. But then don't get too distracted by all of your senses. And again, it can be kind of funny. Like even me in my practice, I'm like, "Whoo, I'm feeling hot, and this is bothering me. I'm getting just unhappy by the fact of how hot I am." But as a practice of non-attachment, letting go, just be like, "I'm hot. That's happening." Or that person next to me smells really bad. That's happening. I don't know. Or, so that's a whole practice. I love it that it came up right here. Um, I think prayer is such a beautiful way. It helps you to slip into um, somewhat of not trying to control things and having trust that in some higher power that will help you, or whether it's, whatever belief system you have, or just, um, I remember a mantra that came up in my life that felt so good at a time when things were not going well in my life. And the mantra that came up was, everything is as it should be. And it didn't feel like anything was as it should be, but I just kept saying it over and over and over and over. And it was so helpful. Just so, and also just gratitude. Like, I think prayer often helps us to get closer to gratitude. There's a teacher, I did a workshop with her, and she said before she even opens up her eyes, she starts her yoga practice, and it is with gratitude. And she just starts listing all of the things that she's grateful for in her life. And that leads to a sense of enoughness, a sense of satisfaction with the way things in your life as they are. And it helps you be non-attached to this thing that we often do, especially in our culture, which is, I need more, 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 more to be happy. So you slip into this sense of enoughness and a sense of satisfaction. Yes, I do practice these things. I work on these things, and I'm glad for these teachings because uh, these are so important. Um, and I think they've made a world of difference in my life. Yeah, so I would, if you have the Reverend Jagannath Carrera book, I would go turn to that page 50 and 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 read some of those. Those are good. Thank you for pointing those out.